So welcome to our last Zoom of the Winter Zoom series. My name is Chris Jacobs. I'm the Executive Director of Pinewoods Camp. We had a great season of Zooms. The first was about our Indigenous neighbors, the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. And then last month, Sam Chapin gave a history of Six Ponds region. It was amazing. Those are both available on our YouTube channel. And I just want to do a shout out to Harris Laparoff, one of our board members. He's here helping with tech support, and he'll be dropping some of those links into the chat feature. And so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started because we have a panel and we're going to try and keep to our time, but with four of us talking and chatting, it might get a little long. Well, hopefully not long, but we might be just a little passionate. We do ask that you hold your questions until the end, just so that we don't get off of our time. So tonight, we're going to be talking about the conservation and biodiversity of the Six Ponds region. And tonight, we have Karen Gray, the president of Wildlands Trust. We have Blake Dinius, the entomologist educator for Plymouth County. And then we have Steve French, a field naturalist with Mass Audubon's Southeast Mass region. And so thank you all for being here. And again, I'm Chris Jacobs, Executive Director of Pinewoods. I'm also a naturalist and just a nature nerd. And so we'll be sharing all of our knowledge and we hope you enjoy. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Karen Gray. She's going to kick it off and talk a little bit about the history of the conservation in the Six Ponds region. So thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Chris. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to hear us all speak about an area that we're all very attached to. I've been asked to talk about Wildlands Trust. First of all, I apologize that it looks like we didn't pay our electric bill at Wildlands Trust. I'm not sure why I'm so dark, but I'm back here if you can see me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Wildlands Trust, and then I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about how a land trust works. I don't want to assume that everybody knows that. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story of how we got started here in Plymouth. We're going to look at just some quick slides of some recent projects. And then most importantly, I want to talk to you about our vision for Plymouth. So we're brought together here tonight by this really strong sense of place that we all share. We are in this incredibly unspoiled place with beautiful forests, ponds, trails, and wildlife. And most importantly, an incredibly strong conservation ethic and legacy in this neighborhood, probably like no other I've seen in the rest of the region where we work, which is pretty vast, 1,700 square mile area. Places like Six Ponds are rare, especially being this close to a major city like Boston. Where they exist, these places are integral to our quality of life, rooted in meaning and memory, which is why most of us are here tonight instead of kicking back to watch Jeopardy. Let's see, I'm going to go to my next slide. I want to introduce you to an organization I've had the pleasure to be part of for almost 17 years. I'd like to think that Wildlands Trust has had a little something to do with why Six Ponds region is so special. We're committed to the entire region, even though we started here in the Six Ponds area. We go as far north, you can see on my map here, as Needham. We go south all the way down to the Cape Cod Canal. And in the west, we go right up to the Rhode Island border. And if you know anything about this region and you look at the names of the towns on this map, you have this sense of just how different, how diverse our coverage area is, and really how complicated it is. We have 350 parcels of land in our portfolio. We work in 57 towns. As I said, we cover a 1,700 square mile area. And this area is where 27% of the population of Massachusetts lives. So, you know, for a relatively small organization, our operating budget is just about $1.5 million. We impact a very, very large area of the state. So I recognize a lot of you as Wildlands Trust supporters. I know many of you know a lot about us and what we do, but I often want to give talks. I realize there are people out there who just don't know what a land trust is. So I just wanted to give you a quick analogy that I use that really helps people get it. And that is comparing a land trust to a museum. Museums and land trusts showcase their masterpieces, but we also have things stored away in the dusty basement. But all the pieces that we have in an art museum, you've got pieces of art. At the Wildlands Trust, we have pieces of land. All of these things comprise a collection that we manage and hold for the benefit of the public. So as I said before, we have 350 parcels in our portfolio. So I want to take you back in time here because the genesis of the Wildlands Trust is a really interesting story. If you know your Plymouth history, you might remember what was happening here in the late 1960s. And this is really kind of a fun little cover to the 1960, January 5th, 1967 Old Colony Memorial. And this is reporting on the news that Plymouth is going to get a nuclear power plant. I think we won the lottery back then. And if you read these quotes, it's expected to bring sharp property tax reduction. You're likely to save $34 a year. It's going to strongly attract industry and business and add to our national image. And some of the quotes over here are just priceless. I'm not sure whatever happened to Congressman Keith, who thought it was the best thing ever, or Representative John Armstrong, who was delighted, or even the selectman who just said, wow. So you can see there was a lot of enthusiasm about getting a nuclear power plant. Meanwhile, at the Plymouth Airport canteen, something very different was going on. Our people, the founders of Wildlands Trust, were a bit more cynical about the arrival of Boston Edison. There's some real plotting and scheming going on here. People mobilized under the leadership of local activist Leona Asker and Manamet Bird Observatory founder Betty Anderson. A visionary group rallied around the idea that this new power plant would likely cause a drastic reduction in property taxes, which could incentivize a surge in commercial and residential development. So this group came up with a strategy. Their plan A was to introduce a building moratorium at town meeting, which failed. Their plan B was to research and put together a land trust. And they did a very, very, very good job putting this together. And in 1973, Leona Asker had befriended the Emery family, which agreed to take a chance and put their beautiful 126-acre wooded lot into the fledgling Wildlands Trust. So this was a really, really small step, big to the Emery family at the time, but it launched a really important big idea, which was the regional land trust that Wildlands Trust has become now. So the Emerys, we consider to be our first family of Wildlands Trust, and they, along with the Conants, the Briggs, the Bongiovannis, the Birds, the Davises, the Douglases, and many others, have helped to establish this really strong base of protected lands and the conservation ethic in the Six Ponds region. I'm just going to briefly walk you through some of our projects. We do a lot of work in Plymouth, but we do a fair bit of work outside of Plymouth. And this was a project we just worked on last spring to help protect the Peaceful Meadows Dairy Farm in Whitman, Massachusetts. This was a 56-acre dairy farm, dairy shop, ice cream store that is probably one of the most important features in the entire town of Whitman. We worked with a private farmer to protect it, and now we're in the process of putting conservation restrictions on it. This is the Eel River Preserve in Plymouth. This was 56 acres, 2 parcels of land with the Eel River running through it. We protected this about 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm just showing you this because it's such an iconic property in the Chiltonville neighborhood. This is a project we just finished this fall, 200-acre pecan farm in Middleborough. Wildlands Trust took the lead with 3 or 4 different organizations and the town to raise $6.2 million to protect this land. Two weeks ago, we closed on 30 acres of land, which we added to one of the most important urban parks in our region, Field Park in Brockton. This is a park where Wildlands is spearheading an effort to create a master plan for the revitalization of this park. Over the past 4 or 5 years, we've added 67 acres to our halfway pond conservation area, including our new stewardship training center, the big white house on the hill. So what's next? Where do we go from here? So as president of a land trust, my job is to promote open space protection and to help preserve important parcels of conservation land. It sounds quite simple, but actually it's pretty complicated business. For starters, land trusts are in direct competition with some of the most financially lucrative sectors of the economy that also rely on open land: residential development, commercial development, energy production, and transportation. Borrowing funds is standard practice for these sectors, but it's not the case in the land trust world. We can only pay what we are able to raise. Secondly, most sellers think their land is worth a lot more than it really is. And this is especially true when you're dealing with businesses, or if there are multiple siblings involved in a land protection deal who stand to personally benefit from a sale. People coming to the table with inflated numbers in their heads makes it very difficult for us. Thirdly is this myth that we deal with all the time, which is that taxes go down if more houses and businesses come into the community. As many of us know, taxes actually increase because of the demand for expanded services. So when you think about the constraints that we have in actually doing our job, what I'm showing you here is incredibly ambitious. This is our vision for Plymouth. We are trying to put together what we call the Atlantic Coastal Woodland Corridor, which actually goes from Miles Standish State Forest all the way out to the ocean. And what you see in red is the Holtec lands. These are the most important properties in all of Plymouth for us to protect. If you look just a little above the Holtec land, we've already created the direct access to the ocean, but we need these lands in order for this corridor to be successful. We're working on that project, and everything in purple, which is a lot of the land that provides the connectivity up to the Holtec lands, our projects that are underway here at Wildlands Trust. You see down here, there's another purple dot. This is the 1,000 acres. Again, there's some activity there. So if we all do our jobs, Plymouth is going to have some very good news around new conservation land in the next decade. So however the Six Ponds region fits into your life story, I just want you to know that Wildlands Trust is working hard to keep it and the rest of Plymouth special. And that's it. I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Karen. For those of you that are here tonight who are not neighbors in the Six Ponds area, but you come to Pinewoods, the headquarters for Wildlands Trust are right on the other side of Long Pond, on Long Pond Road. And for many of you who come to camp, you pass their headquarters on the way in. And it's lovely that Pinewoods gets to benefit in the Six Ponds neighbor for all the work that that Wildlands Trust has done. So thank you, Karen. I know I love hiking the trails and walking and making observations and just enjoying nature. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure.
So I'm just going to quickly, before I introduce Blake, I'm just going to quickly do, let me just talk about this project through iNaturalist. iNaturalist is a platform where you can make observations, submit observations, and have a world of experts essentially help you identify the species. It's crowdsourcing citizen science at its best. And so not quite a year ago, talking with the Six Ponds Improvement Association, I said, oh, it'd be great to be able to track some of the species that are here in the Six Ponds region. So I started the Six Ponds observation project within iNaturalist. And we'll have Harris drop the link into the chat if you want to learn more about it. But in less than a year, we've had some amazing results already. And we've had over 4,000 observations. We've observed almost 1,000 species.
Wow.
We've had over 800, almost 900 people come in and help identify species. And we've had over 100 people make observations. Now, this actually, this project is an open project. And so anyone that is in the Six Ponds region that has an iNaturalist account and uploads a picture that they took in the Six Ponds area will automatically get uploaded. So this actually, even though it just got just created this past year, it's actually collected data from many years. Mm-hmm. And here are just some recent observations. This was this narrow-fruited water starwort. I don't even know what it is. Was observed 4 days ago. Here are just some project stats showing you some of the species, the most observed species. It's not surprising that the most observed species are plants. One of the reasons I love plants is because they sit still. You'll see that over here in the middle, we have green and then yellow. Green means it's research grade. That means someone's gone in and confirmed that, yes, it is, that is what you said it was. And then this yellow area needs ID. And then over here on the right, these colors represent the different areas. Blake, you'll be happy to see that there is a lot of orange. There's a lot of insects that are represented in this project. So what are the project requirements? It's hard to draw a map of 6 ponds. And so this big, I don't know what shape that is. The lighter tan, that is what I, decided that was going to be the 6 ponds region. If I had more time and tech skills, I could probably go in and draw little lines. You can only do straight lines, no curves. And then this darker area within the 6 ponds region, that's actually Pinewoods. And so there's the 2 projects. So there's a project that we've set up just for Pinewoods, an area, and then we have the 6 ponds region. So all taxa, any user, anyone that's involved with any projects, any date, but it does have to be either research grade or needs ID. So that means someone who's taking a picture of a plant in their yard that's cultivated, and they label it as that, won't get uploaded. I'm going to escape now. I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to have Blake talk about some of the insects and arthropods that are found in the Plymouth area. And again, for those who are just joining, Blake is the educator entomologist for Plymouth County. So take it away, Blake.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. That's a great kind of that introduction that kind of moves right into what I'm going to be talking about, which is how to find insects in the area. And my hope is that at the end of this, maybe you all are inspired to conserve the land around. So trying to tie it in with what Karen was talking about, because it's really important. I mean, insects serve so many important functions. I know a lot of people, when they see bugs, and I've grown up with this my entire life, I've always loved insects. And so I've always kind of faced the stigma that insects have against them, is that they kind of scream, they don't like it, and they immediately want to kill it, which is really sad because insects, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many entomologists, insects represent the little things that run the world. And so, kind of like the way that if any of us are parents, we do a lot of things for our kids and they don't necessarily notice it, but they see what happens behind the scene. They wake up, they have clean clothes. They wake up, they have food on the table. They wake up, they get bathed, they have a clean house. All of these things are being taken care of by the parents, and the kids just kind of exist within that realm. Now, we're kind of like the kids, and what is being taken care of in the background are everything that the insects are doing, right? So even if you don't like insects in general, over 3/4 of the flowers in the environment are pollinated by insects. So just looking out in your environment, if you look out today, it was a really nice day. The flowers are blooming, that wonderful smell. You can thank an insect for bringing that to you. 6 out of 10 birds need insects for food, at least at some point in their life. So again, even if you're not a fan of insects, at least they're food for, in this case, the scarlet tanager. Insects have also been referred to as ecosystem engineers. Now, this insect on the top left might be quite unassuming. It's a small brown insect called a caddisfly, but these are really important aquatic insects. Not only do they provide food for fish, but they can also alter the flow patterns of aquatic systems. Because they form webs as larvae, they can actually hold grains of sand together, and in doing so can prevent erosion. It can change water dynamics. It can completely alter the course of that river or stream just based on this one insect, right? And it can even resist heavy water events, flood events, rainwater events, all because of the presence of this one insect. Nearly every plant, when you look outside, nearly every plant, especially if it's native, is fed on by an insect. Insects eat other insects. So if you don't like bugs, you gotta like bugs because they're gonna eat the other bugs. And insects are even helpful in the roles that they play in decomposition. So I'm pretty sure everyone does not like poop. And insects are one of the things that are in the environment that clean that up. Again, they're doing all of this work behind the scenes to make sure that our environment is nice and clean and available to be enjoyed when you step outside. Except, but the fascinating thing that I love about insects is that they're so complicated and there's so many of them. When I grew up, you know, I love dinosaurs and sharks like pretty much every boy, but you can't go in your backyard and see a dinosaur and a shark. But what you can see is an insect. And what I discovered is that there are so many species in your own backyard. We we estimate that there are at least 1 million undiscovered insects in the world, possibly over 30 million. Sorry, at least over 1 million, possibly over 30 million. And another statistic on top of this is that we estimate that for every person in the world, there are 1.2 to 1.4 billion insects, not species, but individual insects in the world. So we've got 37 people that I'm counting as participants here. 37 times, like let's just do 37 times one for the sake of convenience, right? 37 billion insects in the world just with the 37 people here. Amazing. However, insects are in trouble, right? Now, I know the New York Times, it's not always the most reliable source of information, and they did publish something called the Insect Apocalypse a few years back, and I think that this was a lot of hype. We realize now is that it's not completely all bad news, right? There's a much more nuanced and much more complicated picture going on here. We do understand now that insects are declining. And because I've just spoken about the number of services that they fulfill in the environment, how many there are, just even a small percentage decrease, 1 or 2%, could be catastrophic in the long run. We can do a lot to save them, right? And it's actually really easy. And it just starts with loving it, right? It starts with observing and loving it. To protect something in the environment, you first need to love it. You're not going to protect something if you don't love it, right? And to love something, you need to see it. It's just these simple steps right here. Start with just your phone. A lot of people, they're playing on their phone all the time. I see kids playing Pokemon Go, playing games on their phone, all these things. Instead of doing that, you can actually point that phone at the environment around you, observe it, and be doing a heck of a lot of good in protecting everything around, serving that for your generation and future generations forward. Because this data actually does get used for scientific research. It is very, very important, especially in the case of insects. Like we have this example of a pygmy snaketail. It's not something you're going to find around here, I'm guessing, but it's considered a rare dragonfly, and it was discovered in a brand new location in Michigan that we don't even know why it was there, right? And this was discovered not by entomologists, but by regular people that didn't study entomology, but were just passionate about finding dragonflies. This is something that you can do. It's tangible, it's within your reach. The ability to find insects in your area that we don't believe are there and could possibly be there and could be meaningful in terms of conservation and protecting these insects and preserving the ecosystems around you. Insects are pretty much everywhere you look. And this is, again, what I love so much about them is they're so easily accessible to everyone. Like you can get out of your car, look at a patch of goldenrod, find all these different insects just on that patch of goldenrod. That is as simple as that. Just take out your phone, snap the goldenrod for the plant, and then snap all the insects that are on it. There's some other examples of insects that you might find on goldenrod. These are predators. And just to kind of, as an example of what some things that I found around Plymouth, Chris asked me to maybe give some examples. And these are some of my favorite insects that I found in the Plymouth area. It's actually one of my favorite towns to go looking for insects because it's such a unique spot, such a unique location. A lot of people don't like spiders, I know, but the spider on the bottom left is actually a really cool spider called Geolycosa. And the one on the top left, right is not a spider, but a mite. And that's actually a mite in the genus Leptis. And that's actually a pretty rare mite to find right here in Plymouth, right? And the one on the bottom right, I'm just showing because it's common, but it's really pretty, called the orchard orb weaver. You've got a variety of different insects in the order Hymenoptera. That's sawflies, ants, bees, and wasps. And this is just some variety of things that I found in the Plymouth area. The one on the top left, that's a male. What is the name? I'm blanking on the name, but it's a really cool bee, really furry bee. that I found in Miles Standish State Forest. But you can imagine that this bee exists in a lot of places around Plymouth. You got different kinds of bugs. The green bug in center right. I know a lot of people will call that a green stink bug, but that is actually not Schnavia hilarius. That's actually Schnavia pennsylvanica, and it's a different species. If you look at it, it's much more round and I think a lot more cute than the green stink bug. And the only place I have ever seen this species, which is one out of about 45 different species of stink bug we have in Massachusetts, is in Plymouth. So that's something that I don't know if it's in. I wouldn't call it like endangered but it's incredibly rare, localized. You don't find that everywhere, and it's also possible that it could be more widespread, but maybe just people aren't looking and aren't noticing. So you could be one of those folks that is looking and noticing these things and finding new things around that we didn't know existed. There are some of the. Oh, I meant to delete this cricket on the bottom, but that's a cricket. That's not a beetle. These are all beetles, with the exception of the bottom, one of the bottom center ones. It's a redheaded bush cricket or handsome. No, actually, that's a locust. What is that? That's a I'm blanking on that name. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. But that should not be in this picture. Um, you've got flies, a lot of different kinds of flies that you could find in the area. Butterflies, of course, the leps. It's not surprising that I have a lot of photos of butterflies because they're just so charismatic and people seem to like them. Same thing with moths, a variety of different kinds of moths that you can find in the area. Of course, many of them you might not notice unless you set up a light trap, and you can see the background of some of these moths. That's exactly what I did, is I set up a light trap to find them. And just different kinds of insects, dragonflies as well, dragonflies and damselflies. Here's an interesting observation that occurred. In Plymouth, we actually noticed something called a Compton's tortoiseshell. And this was seen in 2021 in Plymouth County, actually in Miles Standish again. And it could be other places, but it periodically establishes temporary breeding populations, and it might be absent for many years afterward. And I believe this was the first observation of Compton's tortoiseshell in Plymouth that there's ever been. I don't think that it's the only one, but it's one of those things that unless you're looking for it, you're not going to find it. This is a beetle that I found, the marsh lady beetle. I found this in October of 2020. It hadn't been observed since 2014, and it's actually the first reported sighting. I had the first reported sighting in Plymouth County. I don't even think this beetle's rare. I think that just people are not necessarily going out and looking for insects. This one is what I think is particularly rare. I saw this one. It's September 2020, and it's the first reported sighting in New England. And you can see based on the maps on Bug Guide, it's the first. You can see like right here on the top right. It's the only sighting in Massachusetts, and you can see on the bottom photo from iNaturalist, that red dot up there near Boston, that's me, and everything else is much further away, much further south. So why was this beetle found here? I don't know. I think, and I found this in Plymouth. I think that it's possible that we could have a local population of this beetle. Maybe it's not even this species. Maybe we need to send this out for molecular testing to see exactly what it is and why it's here and not with its friends out in Texas. I don't know. Chris did want me to talk a little bit about some of the bad bugs that you might find, and I think it's a good idea just because when you're out looking for things, if you notice something new and something different, it's always a good idea to get it checked out. And then you can send this in one of the easiest things you can do is instead of focusing on identification and trying to learn exactly what they look like, there are if you upload this to iNaturalist, there are projects that iNaturalist will pool and almost like ping people that are looking for invasive insects. It'll let them know. So again, iNaturalist is great to use because it's going to even let people who are looking for invasive species be aware of them just because of that. And one of the spotted lanternflies that we saw in Plymouth was uploaded to iNaturalist, and that's how we found it, is through iNaturalist. So it's a good idea to do it. What does spotted lanternfly look like? It has a lot. It varies a lot in appearance, and so you can memorize this. You can look at it, or you can just use iNaturalist and load it up with your phone. It's really easy to get involved as well. I have a picture of the Wareham Land Trust, but any of the land trusts in the area are great. We lead walks all the time. There's always outreach, education, seminars, lectures. We do a lot of stuff to teach people about why it's useful to preserve land. At this point, I've come to the end of my presentation. I think we're going to save questions to the end, but hold any questions that you might have, and I'll be around for people to answer any of those for people.
Thank you so much, Blake. And that spotted lanternfly was actually found just off of Little Long Pond, it looks like, by the INAT observation. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve, Steve French, and he is going to cover birds, amphibians, and reptiles that are found in the Six Ponds region. So thank you, Steve.
Well, thank you, Chris. And I got to tell you, so far, I've been very interested in everything that everyone's had to say. And so I kind of approached this a little bit differently. I actually went into iNaturalist and I looked at this project and drilled into it so I could pick out species that people are seeing. So as we see here, in the bird area, scarlet tanagers, for reptiles and amphibians, I've got garter snakes and fowler's toads. These are all fairly common, but it's just great to see. So when I drilled into it, this is what I saw through the end of March, that people had logged 72 different species of birds, 8 species of reptiles, and 9 amphibians, which is pretty good. So we'll take a look at some of those. So I broke this out so we could take a look at the snakes first. And there were 4 different snakes that I saw. The smooth green snake. It's not one that I have personally seen myself. Whoop, ahead of myself here. But it's a little bit more secretive, but I thought that was pretty interesting to see that somebody had reported it down there. And many of you probably have seen milk snakes. They're usually around late in the day, early evening. They look an awful lot like rattlesnakes, and sometimes they shake their tails just to kind of fake you out. But they're fairly common, and they can grow as long as 2 to 3 feet. And then this ringneck snake, I thought that was another cool one. I had seen that maybe 10 years ago, and when I first saw it, I just couldn't believe that there was a snake that looked like that around here. And you can see how it's got the orange belly and the brown back and the orange ring around its neck. Then as far as turtles, there were 4 different turtles. We had obviously the snapping turtle. We always have snapping turtles around here, and they can get quite large. And I'm sure many of you have seen them in the area. And then the eastern musk turtle. That's not one that people see that often. And that's a turtle that spends most of its time in the water. It does come out periodically. It's not anything like the painted turtle that, as soon as the sun comes out, they're out basking in the sun. The musk turtle sort of sticks to the bottom of the ponds. And if you do run across one, they earn their name as a musk turtle by giving off an odor that, isn't all that pleasant. And then obviously painted turtles. We have plenty of painted turtles around here. That's probably the most common one that you're going to see. And for you folks down in your area, the northern red-bellied cooter. And this one is pretty much endangered, both federally listed and state listed. And our population is pretty much confined to the Plymouth County area. So I thought that was great that people are reporting seeing that. Then amphibians. So I broke that out by frogs and toads and salamanders. And so the first two I just wanted to call your attention to were wood frogs and spotted salamanders. So if any of you are like me and like to get out in the early spring, sort of the end of March, beginning of April, looking for frog eggs and salamander eggs, they call that the big night when they come out to vernal pools. And seeing that wood frogs and spotted salamanders have been noted down there is actually a very good indication that there are a lot of vernal pools around. And then obviously everybody's heard spring peepers, right? They sing and all day long sometimes, but early evening and early in the morning you hear them the most. And then American toads and Fowler toads. You know, the one thing I will say about those is they're very common and they're very, especially when the American toad is smaller, they're pretty hard to tell apart. And somebody gave me a trick many years ago to figuring out which one is which. If you can catch them and turn them over, the Fowler toad doesn't have any spots on its belly. So it's got sort of what they call an immaculate belly. And then a couple of other salamanders, or the other salamander that they had here was the redback salamander. So that's very, very common. And then this is sort of my area, you know, one of the bird nerds around. So you could take a look. This is a pretty extensive list of birds. Give you a second just to kind of scope down all of these. I won't read them to you, but I'll go on in a minute to a few that I'd like to bring to your attention. But you can see there's warblers, hummingbirds, owls. I mean, all the things you would expect in your area. So these are a few that I thought were kind of worthwhile to pick out. So wood ducks, and you probably are shaking your head. No, why am I indicating those? Well, there was a period of time where hunting and loss of habitat pretty much brought the wood ducks to the lowest point in Massachusetts history. And between conservation and you know, all of our land trusts and everything, protecting wetlands and protecting lands, and also the hunters, you know, Ducks Unlimited, all that money that went in to support them, they have brought those back. And Mass Audubon does what they call a breeding bird atlas. And they found in the second breeding bird atlas that the wood ducks are now found in 70% of Massachusetts. So they have made a huge, huge comeback. They are still a little bit thin south of Boston, but they are definitely recovering. The next two, the pine warbler and the eastern whippoorwill, are actually very common in the Plymouth area. You know, obviously the pine warblers, just by the name, you can tell that they typically live in pine forests, but they also like pitch pine forests. So Miles Standish and that whole area that you guys live in is perfect for them. And then eastern whippoorwills. Now, you guys seem to still have some of them. I have nothing up by me. I never hear them. I'm up in Hanson. I haven't heard of one in many years, but the story behind these is that when Mass Audubon did their first birding atlas, between that and the second birding atlas, the amount of whippoorwills went down by half. So they had 20% coverage back in the 70s, and now they have 12%. So the greatest declines are actually in our area. So it's pretty good that you're still hearing them. So I mean that's really important to report that through iNaturalist and iBird. It just or eBird, just because in order for us to know, that they're still there and that they're viable, we really need citizen science to help us identify them. And then the broadwing hawk, that's something that we don't typically have nesting here. So I saw that that was reported. I thought that was pretty interesting. I have seen them in different parts of the state, and usually they're migrating through. So if somebody ever tracks down that they're nesting, that would be a huge win. And black pole warblers, I just picked this one out just in terms of warblers in general. Plymouth seems to be right on the flyway, so a lot of them drop in, and there's been quite a few black poles over time that have been sighted there. Now, I got two birds here that I'm gonna kind of go a little bit further on. So I noticed a glossy ibis, which is a bird that typically lives down south, um, was actually reported up in your area. And the first documented nests of those was back in 1974. And what they found is they tend to congregate and nest around other herons and egrets. So places like Clark's Island and some of the areas out on Martha's Vineyard. So if anybody were to be able to locate them nesting down there, that would be a huge hit. But at this point, they think there's around 100 breeding pairs across the entire state. So they are definitely moving further north. And this is an indication to us that climate change is extending the reach of a lot of these birds. And then the next one, I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen a blue heron if you haven't been down to Florida, but if you look at the range map on the right-hand side, they do have a little sliver of breeding that comes up the coast of Massachusetts. And that is pretty ambitious. They don't really breed up here. They haven't had a documented breeding pair in years. However, they are breeding someplace because they're passing through here, and they are sighted at different places every year over the past 10 years. So they are extending their range too. And this is a bird. This is what we're looking at on the left is a adult. A juvenile would be more white, so it's easily confused with egrets. So to me, those two birds, let me go back. So glossy ibis, I don't know how many of you could put it in the chat if you've seen these in your area. And little blue herons, to me, those were very, very indicative of a healthy environment. And then I'll be open for questions after this, but I didn't have this slide in here until today, just because I seem to be seeing an eagle at least twice a week now. I do walks all over the South Shore, and I just see them everywhere. And this is an indication to me that all of the hard work that everybody has done over the past 30 years to clean up the environment, make it hospitable to raptors has brought back the bald eagles big time, and they're everywhere now. And you guys have them really close to you. I think Halfway Pond has a nest, but they're everywhere. I was at Ponca Park this morning and I had a juvenile flying through. So, doesn't matter where you go, you're going to find them. And I want to thank you. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was
You're welcome.
Great. And so, yeah, just continuing on the theme of conservation and all the, not just the amount of land that's here in the Six Ponds area that is preserved, but the different types of habitats. We have bogs, we have ponds, we have streams, river, vernal pools. I was really excited yesterday. I found a fairy shrimp in the vernal pool right at camp. And it's the first time I've seen it since I've been here. And so that was very exciting. Talk about wood ducks. Steve, I think I had emailed you a couple of weeks ago. There were a pair of wood ducks sitting on my dock at Round Pond, and they're actually nesting in a pine tree right behind the house. We're seeing bald eagles, similar to you, Steve. I'm seeing them a couple of times a week. We know that the island in the middle of Halfway Pond that is owned by the Nature Conservancy, they've been doing a lot of research for years and years. It was one of the first spots on the South Shore that bald eagles returned to. And so, again, it's just a really unique and special place. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I did put in the note, one of our big birder campers and volunteers saw a glossy ibis over.
Yeah, I see that in the chat. That is great.
And so I don't think that was his observation in iNaturalist. He uses eBird, so that other people saw the glossy ibis as well. So that's really neat. So
yeah.
I did run over to see if I could find it, but I missed it. So yeah.
In all of these things, iNaturalist and eBird, all of that data is like critical, because that's how they're able to determine the movement of different species and, the numbers, and to help verify, where they're moving to. And especially with the climate changing, it's, a lot of these birds are moving north. They have to. I mean, they're the insects, and Blake can support that some of these insects are actually moving north too.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So it is coming up on 8 o'clock. So I'm just going to quickly go through and talk about some of the plants that have been seen and again, there are so many to choose from. I chose some of the plants that are more common, actually, rather than the ones that are the most rare. And these are really special. So let me just start my being in this area. We do have a lot of pines. We have the white pine and we have the native pitch pine. It's the start of the pine barrens. And so some of these plants are very common and they're often observed, but we always don't know what they are. So on the left, we have the eastern teaberry, checkerberry, wintergreen. It has lots of different common names. And if you tear the leaf, it has that wonderful wintergreen smell. And this picture was taken at Pinewoods right along the bank. I just love the little dainty flowers. They remind me a little bit like the blueberry flower. And then they'll get a bright red berry in the fall. And if you actually bite the berry, it's going to be white inside. It looks like a tiny little apple. Now moving over to the center here, we have striped wintergreen. And so it's funny because it is not in the same genus as wintergreen, which is often what eastern teaberry is called. And I went by the common names that are in iNaturalist. we have wintergreen, striped wintergreen. Well, I learned it as striped Pipsissewa. And if you notice on the right-hand side, that is the plant Pipsissewa, which we actually have a really large grouping of Pipsissewa at camp. And so I like to call this middle one here striped Pipsissewa. Again, though, the leaves are very distinct with the white variegation. And if you just look at the flowers, they're amazing and very dainty. And so these are all low-growing evergreens. And if you hear my dog barking in the background, I apologize. Here are some more low-growing evergreens. The one on the left is called bearberry. Another name for it is kinnikinnick. And this was actually sometimes used as tobacco by indigenous, our indigenous friends here in the area and across the Northeast. What's interesting about bearberry is that they have not figured out how to replicate it or cultivate it, I should say, by seed. And so that is research that is ongoing. And so the only way to cultivate bearberry right now, from what I understand, is by cuttings. Oh no, my middle slide, sorry, I don't know how to go back. Sorry, my middle slide, I messed up the name here. I was copying. This is actually trailing arbutus, Epigea repens. And what this also is sometimes called is Mayflower. But what is special about this is that it's Massachusetts state flower, and it has a very leathery-like leaf, and it grows on banks underneath the pines. It does not like to be covered by detritus or leaves. And it is really hard to transplant. And the seeds are actually dispersed by ants. And it has the most amazing smell. And this is found all throughout Plymouth County. The town of Plymouth. It likes sandy soils and growing in the shade. So not striped wintergreen, that's actually trailing arbutus. And then the final one over here on the right-hand side, this is called partridgeberry. And I actually just recently observed this in the Emery Preserve, Karen. So I was really excited to see it. It's not as common. It's very tiny. The leaves are the size of maybe your pinky nail. So they're really tiny. And if you notice both the trailing arbutus and the partridgeberry, they both have repens. And repens basically means creeping. And so these are low to the ground, vine-like evergreens. All right. And so continuing with some evergreen shrubs, we have shape laurel, which likes shade. And they get this beautiful pink little flower that's maybe about the size of your thumbnail. And they seem indistinct except for when they sorry, when they're blooming, and the blooms are just magnificent. And in the middle, gallberry, oftentimes also called inkberry. But if you search inkberry, there's going to be about 10 different species that are also called inkberry. But this can grow up to 8 feet tall. It spreads through suckers, and it can tolerate some shade. It can tolerate sun, but it is dioecious. That meaning that the male and the female are on separate plants. And if you're at Pinewoods and you're looking at the camp office, there is a large stand of it just to the right of the office, which is fabulous. Now, the next one is not technically an evergreen. It's actually technically deciduous, but it's considered semi-evergreen, and that's the northern bayberry. Bayberry, they can get really tall. They can also be quite short. And they do get a small berry that is directly on the stem, and it has a waxy material around it. And if you've ever heard of bayberry candles, this is the plant where bayberry candles originally came from, before they synthetically produced the smell. And it takes a lot of berries to turn into bayberry candles. So then we have some deciduous shrubs. And again, these are just a few that I picked that are some of my favorites that are found in the Six Ponds region. And the first is swamp azalea. It is our only native rhododendron. And it gets these beautiful white flowers in late May and early June that alone, they smell wonderful, but in masses, they can be quite overwhelming. But if you see toward the top here, that actually, where you see these like little strands coming out, those, it might remind you of rhododendron, the cultivated variety. And so these grow along the banks of the water. And so I have not seen them on Long Pond, but I have seen them on Round Pond and Halfway Pond. I haven't been to Bloody Pond yet, but I hope to make it there. And I'm not sure if they're on Little Long or not. And Gallows, I have seen them on Gallows as well. The next one, this is all throughout the Six Ponds area. This is sweet pepper bush. It is also another lovely but can be pungent flower that blooms in end of July and into August. It is a wetland indicator plant, and it's called sweet pepper bush because sweet, the smell, and then the seed produces, the flowers produce these pepper-like seed stalks. And another name for sweet pepper bush is summer sweet. What is neat about the flower is that you can actually take a little stalk, wet your hands, and it will create a lather. So it's a great way to, after you're looking for cool insects in the water, aquatic insects, you can wash your hands with some sweet pepper bush. Moving over, we have another neat plant that has fragrant smell, sweet fern. And right now, another plant that has different male and female flowers. Right here, this red, that is the female flower. And then also the catkins. If you receive the Pinewoods articles and announcements today, you'll see a picture of the catkins, which are out. And so the catkins come typically first, followed by the female, and then the leaves will start to emerge. And again, this is, I say that sweet fern probably gets no more than 2.5 feet for height. See. Then I put some that are near the water's edge, since Six Ponds has so much water and it has so many amazing plants. I have seen just some really cool plants, including I have seen sundew, bladderworts, just neat and unique plants that are rare, especially in drawdown areas. And a drawdown area are areas as the water recedes and evaporates, and the water levels get a little low. they reveal these sandy areas, coastal plain ponds, and there are just some really unique plants that are found in that area, including cranberries naturally. But these three are some of my favorite that I've found along the water's edge or right in the water at camp here, including blue flag iris, Iris versicolor. And last year, it was an amazing bloom. And you can just see the vibrancy of the color. And then the next one is actually rarer. It's Rose coreopsis, and I've seen it on several different ponds here in Six Ponds area. And like the yellow coreopsis you might see in the garden, the leaves look similar, the petals look similar. You just typically see this right in standing water or right near the water's edge, especially in those drawdown areas. And then the third one over here to the right is water lobelia. And if you're familiar with blue lobelia, great blue lobelia, or cardinal flower, Lobelia cardinalis, you'll notice that the flower on this looks very similar to both of those. You'll see these, I've seen them on several of the ponds, and they're growing right in the water. Even out 1.5 feet off the shore. And then my last slide for you here is, are these flowers or are they not flowers? And these are flowers. And in fact, the ghost pipe is the #1 observed species in the Six Ponds region for that project. So Monotropa uniflora, una meaning one flower, whereas if you look across to the middle, there's its cousin, pine sap. And so I've seen pine sap just once in the area, but it is really cool. They get their nutrients off of the fungus. They lack chlorophyll. And so they're drawing their nutrients. They have a symbiotic relationship. And then the last one is beach drops. And beach drops, it's another type of symbiotic relationship. It's actually a parasitic, where epiphagus, meaning on beach. So phagus is the botanical or the scientific name for beach. And so these actually draw their energy from the roots of beach trees. And so they're specific. You're not going to find them in an area where there are not beach. So again, these are just a few of the flowers. And if you notice on these, you see a C and a flag and an I. That's because I actually screenshotted these right from my iNaturalist account. It was easier than going through the thousands of photos I have on my camera looking for them. And so just to go back around to iNaturalist, I know Blake touched upon it, how it's a great tool, not only to contribute to the community, the scientific community, but it's a great learning tool. It's how I've learned about so many species, and it helps me when I'm trying to, hone down my ID. I can basically try and get it to maybe a genus, and then I can do some other research and go visit some other sites or use some of my plant ID books and then go back and see if I can key it down a little bit more. I actually became familiar with iNaturalist through something called the City Nature Challenge, which is actually coming up this Friday through Monday. It's all across the world. It's the largest biodiversity study in the world. And so from Friday to Monday, countries and cities around the globe will be participating and uploading. You can learn more at City Nature Challenge. And so City Nature Challenge for Boston is $4.95 east to Stellwagen Bank and down into the islands. So if you live in that area, I encourage you to get out, get involved. I'll be out. If you want to come and park your car, if you don't live in the area, or if you want to come down to camp from Boston area or wherever, you can come park at camp, use the bathrooms, and go out and make some observations. We'd love to have you this weekend. You can just send me an email at executivedirector@pinewoods.org. And then just to mention, we have the Six Ponds Biodiversity Study. So if you really want to see those almost 1,000 species, you can go take a look. And we're going to open it up for questions. So if you have a question, you can either raise your hand, or I ask you to message Harris directly, Harris Laparoff, our board member, so that, because if not, they all come to me and it's hard for me to talk and watch and answer. But if you have questions for any of us, Karen, Blake, Steve, or myself, just put them in the chat. But thank you so much. And thank you, Karen, Blake, and Steve, for being part of tonight's program.
Hi, Chris. I just have a quick correction to make on my presentation. There was a slide, I can show it. Sorry, it's been a long day. I was talking about this beetle down here not being a beetle, and it actually is a beetle. So I don't know what I was thinking. But for those of you who are still here, that is still a beetle. Just ignore what I said earlier.
Thanks, Blake.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions at all? And I do want to shout out to Ann Rozak and Suzanne Rozak and Ann Schumer, who actually have been doing a biodiversity study at Pinewoods during the TradMast session for how many years, Suzanne?
I think this is the third one coming up, third or fourth.
Yeah.
We had COVID where we were
right.
But yeah, I think it's the third, so the fourth coming up.
And so if you go look at the biodiversity study for Six Ponds area, you'll see Anne and Suzanne's name there, right toward the top for the most observed species in the region.
Along with Chris.
Well, I live here, so you're here for just a short period of time and have some amazing observations. And they come down each year also to participate in the City Nature Challenge. They're both heavily involved with that as well.
We'll see you Friday around 11.
I have one question from the chat. Paul asks, are there any beaver colonies in the area or plans to introduce some?
I don't think right here in Six Ponds, but I know, and Karen might know better, but I do know that over at Burridge Pond, there are some beaver colonies. Beavers have made their way eastward over the last couple of decades, and they were pretty much eradicated from this area for quite a long time. And if you like beavers, I highly recommend a book that I just finished called Eager Beaver. And so it really talks about the state of beavers and kind of the love-hate relationship that folks have with beavers. They play an important part in the ecosystem, but for landowners, they seem troublesome. And so, striking that balance, a lot of trapping has happened. So it's a really interesting read. Suzanne.
Just quickly, for people in the Boston area, there's a lot of beaver activity in Needham, like along 128 at Millennium Park, and also Cutler Park in Needham. So I've been going there. You can see beaver lodges. You can see trees chopped down. I haven't seen an actual beaver yet, but if anybody's interested in actually checking them out, come up to that park, to those two parks.
Oh, someone's saying, Pompey is saying that he saw a beaver on Long Pond maybe 5 years ago off of the Ashanti Boathouse right across from camp here. So thank you, Pompey. Any other questions? Well, thank you again.
I do have another question.
Okay, sorry.
David has a question for Karen. I imagine the first Americans significantly changed landscapes and ecosystems intentionally and unintentionally. Then came the colonists who did the same even more so with their agriculture, dairy farming, etc. Not to cause paralysis with analysis, but it makes me wonder how you think about what it is that we want to conserve.
Oh, goodness, it's much too late to answer that question. I'm just kidding. That's a really complicated. We look at conservation values in lots of different ways, and I think I don't know. I really want to. I would like to answer that thoughtfully, and it's a very, very hard question to unravel right now.
I can connect the two of you.
Yeah, I'd like to think about that a little bit more, because it's a long answer.
Understood. Thank you.
And
I don't
again,
know if anybody's noticed, but I've got an appendage here, and I'm a little slow. And anyway,
rotator cuff surgery, is that correct?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I want to say thank you again to Wildlands Trust for all the amazing, and all the families who have donated land to Wildlands Trust, because when we come to camp, and I know many years ago, there was a concerted effort, and many Pinewoods participants helped with the 80 Makepeace, and I'm keeping that from becoming developed right on West Long Pond and Halfway Pond Road. So thank you for all that you do at Wildlands Trust, because all of the neighbors here and all of the Pinewoods participants enjoy the natural landscape, and we're able to see so many amazing species because we have this protected land. So thank you again. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, executive director@pinewoods.org. And with that, thank you and have a great night. So thank you, Karen and Steve and Blake, and thank you, Harris, for running tech. We appreciate it. So have a great night, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, Chris.
Take care, everyone.